Hello, this is Brian. Today is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. I'm here near Monument Peak here in Cleveland National Forest, Laguna Mountains, San Diego County. I'm going to do a much awaited spotlight video. Today, I want to spotlight this beautiful shrub here, and this is Pinkbract Manzanita, Arctostaphylos pringlei subspecies drupacea. It's been quite a while since I've done a spotlight video, so it's more than overdue. A little tickle in my throat. I don't know why. Some dust or something. Bear with me. But what we have here is a medium to very large evergreen shrub in the Heath family, the Ericaceae. And it is a member of the Madrone Tribe, the Arbutoideae, which is a section of closely related shrubs, including madrones and strawberry trees in the Heath family. So what we have is quite a common shrub in portions here of Southern California. Quite common, especially in the peninsular mountain ranges. San Diego County, going up to Riverside County, peninsular mountain ranges like the Laguna Mountains, parts of the Cuyamaca Mountains, Palomar Mountain, especially the San Jacinto Mountains, very common there. And it's also found in portions of the eastern half of the San Bernardino Mountains as well. So, like a typical manzanita, it has dark reddish to brownish bark, and it usually peels towards late spring or early summer. So during those months, you'll see the previous year's bark dry up, curl up, and start flaking off. And we have this massive thicket-forming shrub here. Absolutely beautiful shrub. Sometimes they can get even bigger than this. So Pinkbract Manzanita looks a lot on the outside like pretty much every other manzanita, except for its quite large height. But as I'm going to compare and contrast to a couple other manzanitas of the area, I want to show you a couple of tips that might be able to help identify it. Because the leaves, the bark, the fruits are all pretty similar on our Pinkbract Manzanitas to the other manzanitas that grow in the area. So, what we have here are these kind of oval-shaped leaves, roughly ovate, with a little pointed tip. And they kind of have a rough, kind of sandpapery texture on the older leaves, with the glandular trichomes, or hairs. Newer leaves are a little softer and a little fuzzier. As you can see here, roughly ovate shape. Kind of a light green with a grayish cast is pretty typical, and that's not really an extremely helpful identifying feature, because we do have a few other types of manzanitas that do have similar leaf coloration. So that's really not going to be very helpful, but it is a characteristic of this shrub, and this portion of the video is dedicated to the characteristics of the shrub. In the springtime, they're going to get these small white bell-shaped flowers, and that'll eventually turn into these fruits, which are called drupes. These are drupes. Some people call them berries, but they have a hard seed pit inside. When they're ripened, they are supposed to be edible. These drupes are kind of small, kind of rounded shape, a lot smaller than one of its similar similar relatives, the bigberry manzanita, Arctostaphylos glauca. But those fruits are much larger on bigberry manzanitas, much noticeably larger, and a little even slightly more ovalish shape. But you can see some of these dried fruits here. Maybe I can, pardon me for a minute, I'm going to go ahead and try to see if I can get to the seed inside and show you. The seed inside is kind of a wrinkly, ribbed pit, and it just fell out of my hand. Good job, Brian. So, when these fruits are ripe, they kind of have that orange brownish color. Very thin flesh. Bear with me for a second so I can get to another seed before I drop it. Kind of has a warty, seeded pit, and it does not separate very easily because these are multiple seeds fused. The seeds are fused, and they don't. At least on this one, they don't separate very easily. So again, the fruit is a drupe, may be considered a berry, and manzanita is basically Spanish for little apple. So basically, they look like little miniature apples. They're supposed to taste kind of like an apple. I've never tried a manzanita drupe before. These ones look like they're past ripe, so they might not have the best taste, but they are edible, and it is a wild edible. The flesh is very thin on it. So with Pinkbract Manzanita, flowers in the spring are again bell-shaped and small, very typical of Heath Family, especially the Arbutoideae. And then, of course, summer and fall bring these drupes. So sometimes these shrubs can be very tall and thicket forming like this, and sometimes they can have a little bit of space towards the base where you'll be able to kind of crawl underneath a little bit on some of the very tall older specimens. But what other ways would we be able to use to tell this species of manzanita from some of our other species of manzanita? Well, manzanitas can be extremely hard to tell apart, and I have difficulty with quite a few of them. I'm not going to lie. I've been able to separate a few, and even some subspecies within a species can be very hard to tell apart, especially the Eastwood manzanita, which also grows in this area. There are a bunch of different subspecies of Eastwood manzanita. Arctostaphylos pringlei drupacea is one of two subspecies. The other subspecies is Arctostaphylos pringlei subspecies pringlei, which grows more in Baja California, and it might grow in Arizona, but it's not found here in Southern California. And that's, again, another subspecies of Pinkbract. This is more like the California Pinkbract. And where that name comes from, Pinkbract, is at the base of the flowers is a little pink bract. You see at the base of these fruits are these little bracts, so they're kind of pinkish color. So that's where Pinkbract comes from. So what kind of features would we use to tell this apart from some other species of manzanita? Well, another very similar manzanita is bigberry manzanita, Arctostaphylos glauca. With Arctostaphylos glauca, the leaves are smooth, they're glabrous, whereas these ones are fuzzy to sandpapery in texture. So that's how you tell it apart from bigberry manzanita. Bigberry manzanita sometimes has a little bit redder bark, but that's not always a great telltale sign. So let me go ahead and snatch a picture or two and change my batteries as my batteries are about to die, and then I will start differentiating from some other manzanitas and what kind of habits this species or this one has that our other manzanitas don't have. All right, well, one major difference between this one and basically every other species of manzanita here in Southern California, or I believe in California for that matter, I don't know if this applies to everything in the world, every other species of manzanita, where California is basically the epicenter of Arctostaphylos, by the way. The habits of this shrub are a little bit different. And, well, I should say a habit of this shrub is different. And what I mean by that is, okay, we're going to leave this one and we're going to go look at an Eastwood Manzanita. We're going to look at a subspecies of Eastwood Manzanita. So we're looking here on this Eastwood Manzanita, Arctostaphylos glandulosa, subspecies I don't know, because there are a bunch of different subspecies of this one, and there are local different races of Eastwood Manzanita. But if you notice here, the Eastwood Manzanita drupes are a little bit bigger. Oh, looks like was that a 7-spotted ladybird beetle? Okay. What you notice here is, what do you see at the end of each of these twigs? These are nascent inflorescences. In layman's terms, these are next spring's pre-formed flower buds. Eastwood Manzanita and our other manzanitas do this during the summer and early fall before they harden off for the cold winter months. So they'll pre-form their flower buds with these little bracts around them. So you notice that on this Eastwood Manzanita, they're full of these nascent inflorescences. So they pre-form next spring's flower buds. So these flowers up here, they'll probably open next May. So they're going to be on there for at least 6-7 months before they open up again. Okay, so let's go over to the Pinkbract and see if we see anything different. So again, this one's full of drupes, so we know this one flowers every year. If you notice, on this big healthy shrub right here, and if we go over to this neighboring shrub here, you're going to notice something different. If you look here, there are no nascent inflorescences, no pre-formed flower buds. That is the biggest giveaway that we are looking at Arctostaphylos pringlei subspecies drupacea, Pinkbract Manzanita. They do not preform their inflorescences. They don't preform their flower buds in the summer and fall months. So you won't see a bunch of next year's flower buds hanging off the tips of the twigs like you would in all of our other species of manzanitas here. So if you're hiking in later summer and fall, that's what you're going to notice about Pinkbract Manzanita. No preformed flower buds. That is your biggest takeaway. I mean, hopefully that's your biggest takeaway from this video in identifying this plant. Now, during the early spring, that's when they start forming them. So that's when they might be a little more confused with other ones who haven't opened up yet, like Eastwood Manzanita or Bigberry Manzanita that might not have opened up. Is that you might see the flower buds developing on them, but that's because they form in the springtime. So that time might be one of the more difficult times to identify this shrub. So there are some other slight differences that might make this stand out to some people. It sometimes does with me if I'm not looking at the shrub up close, and it's not always 100%. But sometimes the structure of the upper twigs is slightly different. So we're going to go back to our Eastwood Manzanita buddy right here. You notice how the twigs kind of come up to a kind of just a general, the ends of the twigs are kind of short. The upper twigs are kind of short. So they come to a short end. Sometimes I notice on Pinkbract Manzanitas that the outmost twigs tend to extend out just a little bit more. Again, this is not 100%, but it has clued me in a few times. some of the ends of these twigs are a little elongated, especially on the outside portions of the shrub. Like that twig there is kind of long. That's one thing I've noticed. The ends of the twigs are sometimes a little narrower and longer in profile. Again, that's probably a much less helpful identifier unless you're really super in tune with these shrubs. And that's usually more on the looser, taller, lankier shrubs. So I did mention that these can get even larger than that. They can potentially get up to 20 feet tall, maybe even taller in some spots. One of the best places to actually see Pinkbract Manzanita reach its potential is near the Idlewild area in the San Jacinto Mountains in Riverside County in the San Bernardino National Forest. Sometimes you'll be hiking in some open pine forest or sometimes in some lush chaparral, and these things will reach for the sky. One thing about Pinkbract Manzanita, it gets very large. That and Big Berry Manzanita are two of our largest, tallest species of manzanita here in Southern California. They can potentially become small tree sized if allowed to grow. But what a magnificently beautiful shrub. So if you're hiking some of the trails near Idlewild, you will notice a lot of these. So I'm going to go back out, take a couple pictures, and then on my last clip I'll talk about the habitat of this plant, because it's quite variable. So, what kind of habitats does Pinkbract Manzanita prefer? Well, they're quite variable. They usually are found above 4,000 feet, sometimes a little bit lower, and sometimes up to about 7,000 feet. I don't know how much higher than that they would go. But they're pretty common, especially between 5,000 and 6,500 feet. They can be very common. Again, San Jacinto Mountains seem to be an epicenter of this plant. As for the habitat, well, one of their main habitats is, well, what a surprise, chaparral. Very at home in the chaparral, and a lot of their common associates are pale silk tassel, Garrya flavescens, and the Ericaceae. As I pointed out before, Eastwood Manzanita. Lots of scrub oaks, and common chamise here, Adenosum fasciculatum, variety fasciculatum. And a lot of times, Yerba Santa, Ericaceae trichicalix, and this one's variety lanatum, and various ceanothus species, such as this one here is cupleaf ceanothus, Ceanothus perplexans. However, they're not just relegated to chaparral. They also grow in woodland and in conifer forest as well. Like I said, I've seen some pretty big ones in the San Jacinto Mountains. I remember when I was a kid, I took a trail down from a cabin that we spent the night at. And I remember walking in either a Jeffrey or Ponderosa pine forest. This was back in 1998, so this was a long time ago. And I remember lots of tall, huge manzanitas in the understory of the conifer forest. They do like to be out in the sun, but they do grow in some sparsely forested areas. So open Jeffrey pine, sugar pine, white fir forest, incense cedar, common associates. So it does grow up into the yellow pine belt and can be quite a common fixture there. So there you have it. Beautiful dark brown bark. Again, beautiful dark brown bark. Typical bark for manzanitas. Again, they peel in the spring and summer, so it looks really flaky for about a month or two out of the year. Very hard wood, very beautiful shrub, beautiful bell-shaped flowers, tall stature when it's growing in favorable conditions, and just a pleasure to see when you're out hiking. So when you're hiking, especially from the eastern San Bernardinos near Angeles Oaks down through Idlewild and here in the Laguna Mountains and Palomar Mountain, be on the lookout for Pinkbract Manzanita. Give it a look and appreciate the beauty of this mountain shrub. That's going to wrap it up for my spotlight on shrubs. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you on the next episode.